She Said You're My Dad, a creative fanfiction inspired by the world of daytime drama. The late afternoon sun spilled through the tall windows of the cafe, painting soft gold across the tables. The place was quiet, too quiet for that time of day. The clinking cups and low chatter that usually filled the air had faded, leaving only the steady hum of the espresso machine and the distant sound of traffic outside. Deacon wiped down the counter for the third time in 10 minutes, pretending he wasn't distracted. He had learned that silence could be dangerous. Silence made room for memories, regrets, and questions he wasn't ready to answer. The bell above the door chimed. He looked up automatically, expecting a regular customer. Instead, a teenager stepped inside, hesitant but determined. Dylan. He'd seen the kid a few times before, quiet, observant, the kind who seemed older than they looked. There was something familiar about them, something that tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. "Hey," Deacon said, forcing a smile. "You want something to drink?" Dylan shook their head. "Can we talk?" The question carried a seriousness that made Deacon straighten. "Sure," he said slowly. "Take a seat." They sat at the corner booth, away from the windows. Dylan kept glancing down at a folded envelope clutched tightly in their hands. Deacon noticed it immediately. "That looks important." "It is," Dylan said quietly. The words hung between them. Deacon waited. Finally, Dylan slid the envelope across the table. "It's for you," they said. "From my mom." Deacon frowned. "Your mom?" Dylan nodded. "She said if anything ever happened, I should give this to you." A knot tightened in his chest. He hesitated before picking up the envelope. The paper was worn, as if it had been opened and closed many times. His name was written on the front in careful handwriting. He froze. He knew that writing. His heart skipped. "No," he whispered, almost to himself. Dylan watched him carefully. "You recognize it?" Deacon didn't answer right away. He carefully opened the envelope, unfolding the letter with shaking hands. The words blurred for a moment until he forced himself to focus. "Deacon, if you're reading this, it means Dylan finally came to you. I don't know how much time has passed, but I hope you're doing okay. There's something I kept from you. Something I convinced myself was for the best. Dylan is your child." The air left Deacon's lungs. He stared at the words, reading them over and over as if they might change. His child. He looked up slowly at Dylan, whose face was tense but steady. "Is this a joke?" he asked, voice rough. Dylan shook their head. "She never joked about this. She said you deserved to know someday." Deacon swallowed hard. "Your mom, why didn't she tell me?" Dylan looked down. "She said she was scared. She didn't think you were ready back then. She thought it would make things harder for everyone." Deacon leaned back, running a hand through his hair. The room felt too small. He had missed so many years. "So, you came here because—" Dylan hesitated, eyes glistening. "She told me something before she passed away." Deacon's chest tightened. "She said, if you ever feel lost, go find him." A long silence followed. Then Dylan whispered the words that changed everything. "She said you're my dad." The cafe felt frozen in time. Deacon stared at Dylan as if seeing them for the first time. The way they tilted their head when nervous. The stubborn spark in their eyes. Something clicked, something he couldn't explain but suddenly felt undeniable. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You don't have to say anything," Dylan replied softly. "I just needed you to know." Deacon folded the letter carefully. "How long have you known?" "Since last year," Dylan said. "She told me when she got sick." Deacon's throat tightened. "And you waited this long?" "I didn't know if you'd want to meet me." The honesty hit him hard. He leaned forward. "Hey," he said gently. "That's not true. I just didn't know you existed." Dylan nodded, but uncertainty lingered. "I'm not here to ruin your life," they said. "I just wanted answers." Deacon laughed softly, a broken sound. "Kid, my life's been messy long before you showed up." That made Dylan smile faintly. It was small, but it felt like the beginning of something. Over the next hour, they talked. About school. About music. About the mother Dylan had loved deeply. Deacon listened more than he spoke, piecing together years he'd never been part of. Every story made him both grateful and heartbroken. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but he was afraid of pushing too hard. At one point, Dylan pulled out an old photograph. Deacon stared at it. A younger version of her stood laughing at the beach, holding a small child. He had never seen that picture. He felt tears sting his eyes. "She kept this?" he asked softly. Dylan nodded. "She said you made her laugh when things were hard." Deacon swallowed. "I wish I'd known," he whispered. As evening fell, the cafe lights flickered on. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. "So, what happens now?" Dylan asked. Deacon sighed. "I don't know," he admitted. "I mean, I've missed a lot. I don't want to mess this up." "You don't have to be perfect," Dylan said. "Just honest." He smiled sadly. "Honest I can do." They sat quietly for a moment. Then Deacon asked the question that had been haunting him. "Are you okay? I mean, after losing her?" Dylan's eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying." Without thinking, Deacon reached across the table, resting his hand gently over theirs. It was a small gesture, but Dylan didn't pull away. Days passed. Then weeks. Dylan began stopping by the cafe after school. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Deacon found himself watching the door more often, waiting for that familiar face to appear. One afternoon, Dylan walked in carrying a notebook. "What's that?" Deacon asked. "Stuff I wrote," Dylan said shyly. "Mom used to tell me to write when I couldn't say things out loud." Deacon smiled. "That sounds like good advice." Dylan hesitated before handing the notebook over. "Can you read one?" Deacon nodded. The words were raw and honest, about grief, confusion, and hope. When he finished, he looked up. "This is really good." Dylan shrugged, embarrassed. "Mom said writing helps you figure out who you are." Deacon nodded slowly. "She sounds wise." She was. One evening, as they closed the cafe together, Dylan spoke softly. "Do you ever feel guilty?" Deacon paused. "Every day," he admitted. "For a lot of things." Dylan nodded. "Me too. Like, maybe I should have come sooner." He shook his head firmly. "You came when you were ready. That's what matters." Dylan looked relieved. The bond grew naturally, messy but real. Deacon learned Dylan liked late-night milkshakes, hated loud crowds, and secretly loved old movies. Dylan learned Deacon made terrible jokes, burned toast constantly, and worried more than he admitted. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments, heavy silences, questions without easy answers. But it was real. One night, Dylan asked quietly, "Do you think she'd be happy?" Deacon didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he said. "I think she'd be really happy you came here." Dylan smiled, tears shining. "Sometimes I feel like she's still watching." "Maybe she is," Deacon said. Weeks later, Dylan handed him another envelope. "What's this?"
"My letter," Dylan said.
"For you." Deacon opened it slowly. Inside were simple words. "I don't know what kind of family we'll be, but I'm glad I found you." He looked up, emotion catching in his throat. "I'm glad you found me too," he said. The cafe lights glowed warmly as night settled outside. For the first time in a long time, Deacon didn't feel like his past defined him. He looked at Dylan, this unexpected person who had walked into his life carrying a letter and a truth he never saw coming. He realized something. Family didn't always start at the beginning. Sometimes it arrived late, carrying pain and hope in the same breath. And sometimes, all it took was the courage to say, "She said you're my dad." And in that quiet cafe, among half-empty cups and soft music, a new story began, one written not in perfection, but in second chances, patience, and the slow, steady building of trust. Deacon didn't know what the future would look like. But as Dylan laughed at one of his terrible jokes, he thought maybe, just maybe, they would figure it out together. And for the first time, that felt enough.